Welcome to the channel.
Alright, I guess I'll just start from where things got weird. I wasn't even looking for anything. I was just worried about my kid. My son's 16. He's been going through some stuff, started skipping school, got caught with weed a few times. One day, I noticed his phone buzzing at 2 a.m., not once, but like 3-4 times in a row. Thought maybe it was a dealer or something. So yeah, I logged into our phone plan. We share a family account, so I could see call logs, text counts, times, all that. I didn't find much on him. Just a couple numbers he called way too often and long, which we talked about later. He lied to my face, said it was some friend from school. Still don't know if I believe him, but that's not why I'm here. What caught me off guard was my wife's number. I wasn't even checking her stuff at first. But I got curious. We've been married 18 years, and I'll be real, things haven't been perfect, but we weren't falling apart either. Or so I thought. There was this one number she was texting and calling every single day. And I mean every day, regular as clockwork. Always around 7:30 a.m. when she left for work. Again at lunch. Then around 9 p.m. when I was working night shifts. But never when I was home. That's what did it for me. I stared at that log like it was blinking in red. So I jotted the number down, looked it up. Came back registered to a guy named Aaron, married 5 kids. And it gets better, he works at the same company as my wife. Not in her office, but in a different city. She'd mentioned him before once or twice. Just offhand, saying, Darren's a hard worker, Darren helped cover something last week. Nothing that stood out. Until now. I asked her about it that night. Kept it simple. Hey, who's Aaron? You've been talking to him a lot lately. She didn't even flinch. Just said, oh, he's a friend from work. He's going through a rough patch, just been lending an ear. I nodded. Didn't push. But it didn't sit right. Something in her tone felt rehearsed. Too calm. Too ready. Later that week, I brought it up again, this time a little more serious. I think you should back off from talking to him so much. It's making me uncomfortable. She snapped instantly. Her mood flipped like a switch. Said I was controlling. Said I was paranoid. Then she got real cold. Didn't talk to me for the rest of the night. The next day she barely looked at me. After that? Picking fights over nothing. Dishes. The thermostat. My socks on the couch. It felt like I was the problem all of a sudden. But what got me? What really made me feel sick, the next night, I saw her texting. I asked, you still talking to him? She didn't even lie this time. Just said, I'm not gonna stop talking to my friends because you're insecure. I moved into the spare bedroom that night. Not because I wanted to. But because I knew I'd explode if I stayed. And that was just the start. After I moved into the spare bedroom, things got tense. Cold. We'd pass each other in the hall like strangers. She'd slam drawers harder than needed. She stopped making dinner, not just for me but for our son too. Like the whole house was frozen over because I dared to question her little work friend. I tried reaching out once. Sat her down at the kitchen table, told her this wasn't how I wanted things to be. I wasn't accusing her of anything, I just needed reassurance. I told her it felt like she was pulling away, like she was hiding something. She didn't even look up from her phone. Just said, if you're so worried, maybe you should take a long look in the mirror. You're not exactly husband of the year. That stung. I didn't say much after that. What was I supposed to say? I'm the one who's been working doubles to pay off debt, running around dealing with our son's school, keeping this family from falling apart while she sits there defending another man. I didn't even recognize her anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about that number. Every day, she'd get home from work, head straight into the bedroom, and I'd hear her voice through the walls, soft, giggly low. Then silence. Then the bathroom sink running. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I bought a micro recorder. Tiny little thing. Slid it into her purse when she was in the shower. I felt sick doing it, like I was breaking some unspoken rule, but part of me already knew. I just needed proof. Next day she left for work. I waited till she got home, waited till she went to bed, then snuck into the bathroom and grabbed the recorder. Listened to it out in the garage with shaking hands. There it was. Her voice. Sweet and breathy like I hadn't heard in years. You have no idea how bad I want to do that for your birthday. I was thinking about it all day. She giggled. Then silence again. The kind that makes your stomach turn. Then she said it. I told him I had a family emergency so I could stay late. He bought it. He always does. She was talking about me. I was the family emergency. And here's the kicker, that night she was staying late. It was the same day I had to leave work early because our son got into a fight at school. I was the one who handled everything. Not her. She lied so she could talk dirty to some guy over the phone while I was at a school meeting dealing with our child's future. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in the dark garage with that recorder in my hand, heart pounding like a drum. That was the moment something in me broke. Not just trust. Not just love. Something deeper, like the foundation of who I thought I was. I had no idea how far this went. But I was going to find out. So the next morning, I didn't say a word to her. I made coffee. Packed my lunch. Kissed my son on the head and left like it was any normal day. But my hands were shaking the whole drive to work. I couldn't get her voice out of my head, that giggle, the filth she said, and how casually she threw me under the bus. That day I started making copies. Recorder files. Screenshots of the call logs. I even wrote down the exact dates and times, where I was, what I was doing when she said she was working late. All of it. I started building a little folder of betrayal. And the more I dug, the worse it got. I pulled a favor from a buddy who's good with tech stuff. He helped me run a background check on Aaron. The guy was married alright, 5 kids. Lived 2 cities over. Wife was a schoolteacher. Facebook made them look like the perfect suburban family. Lot of pictures of church events, barbecues, family movie nights. My stomach turned. So I did something I wasn't sure I'd have the guts to do. I called her out again. One night after dinner, I walked into our room and sat on the edge of the bed. I listened to one of your calls, I said. I heard what you said to him. You lied about a family emergency to sneak in time with him. She froze. Didn't say anything for a second. Then, like she hit autopilot, she stood up, grabbed her phone, and said, You had no right to go through my stuff. I stood too. Don't flip this. Just be honest. Was it just phone stuff, or have you met him? She glared at me like I was the one cheating. We met once, she said quickly. Just for coffee. It's not like that. You talked about his birthday. You said things I've never even heard you say to me. Now she was mad. It was a fantasy. I was venting. I never touched him. I didn't believe her. That night, she slept in the bedroom. I went back to the spare room. This time I didn't feel hurt. I felt cold. Numb. Something had flipped in me. She wasn't even pretending to be sorry. Just mad that she got caught. And the next day? She was back on her phone. Same number. Same routine. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. That's when I knew she wasn't going to stop. Not for me. Not for our kid. Not for anyone. So I started planning. And not for reconciliation. For truth. All right, this is where things started spinning fast. I waited a few days just watching. She kept texting him like nothing happened. Walking around the house like I was a ghost. Barely said 2 words to our son. She started dressing up a little more, wearing perfume she hadn't touched in over a year. That stung. I told myself enough's enough. If she won't give me the truth, maybe he will. So I called him. Blocked number. Middle of the afternoon. My hands were sweating, heart racing, but I kept my voice steady when he answered. Hey Aaron, this is Michelle's husband. There was a pause. Long one. Then a nervous chuckle. Sorry, who? You heard me. Michelle. Your coworker. The one you've been having phone sex with while her husband's out working nights and her kid's getting suspended. Silence. Then, look man, I don't know what you think you know. I know everything. I got call logs. I got audio. I know about the fantasy birthday gift. So here's the deal, either you tell me how far this went or I go tell your wife. I'll drive to her work myself if I have to. That got his attention. He started breathing heavier, stumbling over words. It was never physical, okay? I swear. We talked. That's it. She said you two were in a rough patch. She said she felt alone. That she needed someone to talk to. I laughed. Couldn't help it. Yeah? And that someone had to be you, huh? He didn't respond. Then I heard it, a beep. My wife texted him. I just knew it. A minute later, my phone buzzed. Her name popped up. Michelle, don't you dare call him again. This is none of your business. That was it. None of my business. My own wife telling me to stay away from the man she's emotionally cheating on me with. Defending him, not even denying it. I didn't reply. I went outside, sat on the porch, and just stared at the street for what felt like an hour. Our marriage wasn't just cracking, it was already broken. I didn't even matter to her anymore. And worst of all? She was more worried about protecting him than fixing what we had. I started making plans to contact his wife. Not out of revenge. But because someone else out there was probably living in the same lie I had been, and she deserved to know. But before I could even do that, something else happened. Something I didn't expect. Our son found the recorder. So yeah, this one hurts the most. I thought I was being careful. I kept the recorder tucked away in the garage, behind my toolbox, under a pile of old extension cords. No way anyone was gonna find it unless they were digging. Well, turns out my kid was. He's 16. He's been getting into fixing up bikes lately, messing with tools and junk. That afternoon, I walked in from work, expecting the usual silence, maybe another cold stare from my wife. Instead, my son's sitting at the kitchen table, staring down at the recorder in his hand. He didn't even look at me at first. Dad, he said, voice flat, like all the emotion had already been wrung out of him. What's this? I froze. He hit play before I could say anything. And there it was. Her voice. Breathless. Whispering filth into some other man's ear. Telling him how she couldn't wait to, yeah. You get the idea. Telling him I was too busy or too checked out to notice. Lying to him about me like I was just a burden in the way of her fun. He sat through maybe 10 seconds of it. Just 10. Then he slammed the stop button and stared at the floor. I knew something was off, he said quietly. As she acts all fake when you're not home. Always smiling at her phone, laughing at stuff that isn't funny. I sat across from him. Didn't say a word. I couldn't. My throat was so tight I thought I'd choke. Then he asked, "Is this why you moved into the other room?" I nodded. He didn't cry. Didn't scream. He just stood up, walked straight down the hall, opened her bedroom door without knocking, and tossed the recorder at her feet. I know what you did, he said. Don't ever lie to me again. She screamed his name, tried to chase after him, but he slammed his bedroom door in her face. She turned to me with this twisted look, part shock, part rage, like I was the villain here. How could you let him hear that? She hissed. I didn't even answer. Just walked past her and went to my son's room. He was on the bed, earbuds in, staring up at the ceiling like the world just ended. I sat beside him. Didn't force a talk. Just stayed close. That's all I could do. Later that night, she didn't come near either of us. Slept on the couch. No argument. No apology. Nothing. It's weird. I thought the worst part would be hearing her say those things to another man. But it wasn't. It was seeing the look on my kid's face, like something broke in him. That's what betrayal really does. It doesn't just destroy marriages. It hits everything. It breaks your home down to pieces. After that, something changed in me. No more waiting for her to come clean. I was done protecting her. So yeah, after my son found out, after the recorder hit the floor and everything blew wide open, I knew it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us, me, my son, and the people that woman and her little office boyfriend were lying to. So I found her. His wife. Melissa. Took maybe 10 minutes. Facebook made it easy. They had this big Christmas family photo pinned to the top, all 5 of their kids in matching sweaters. He had his arm around her like he was some proud, faithful husband. Made me sick. I didn't message her. I didn't want this to be something she could ignore or brush off. I needed her to know. I needed her to see me. So I drove to their house. Sat in the car for 15 minutes just staring at the front door, trying not to shake. Then I got out and knocked. She opened the door with one of those polite, cautious smiles. Can I help you? I swallowed hard. I'm sorry to show up like this. My name's Jake. I think we need to talk about your husband. Aaron. Her face didn't change much at first. Just a flicker in the eyes. Then she stepped outside and closed the door behind her. I handed her a printout. Call logs. Times. Dates. And a USB drive with the audio file. I'm not trying to hurt you, I told her. But I think you deserve to know who he really is. She stared at the paper, didn't say anything for a while. Her hands started to shake. How long? She asked. Months. Maybe longer. My wife said it was just phone stuff. I don't buy it. She nodded slowly. Looked like she'd been punched in the stomach. Then she said something I didn't expect. I had a feeling, she whispered. He's been different. Distant. But every time I asked, he said I was imagining it. I nodded. Yeah. That's how they do it. We didn't talk much more. I gave her my number, told her if she wanted more proof, I had it. She didn't even say goodbye. Just turned around, walked back inside, and shut the door without another word. I sat in my car for a long time after that. I don't even remember driving home. I just remember gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white and thinking, this is what justice looks like now. Just a quiet front door and a woman learning her whole life is a lie. When I got home, my wife was waiting for me on the porch. You went to her, didn't you? She said. I didn't say anything. Just walked past her and into the house. She followed me in, yelling now. You had no right, this was between us. I turned calm but cold. No, Michelle. This was never just about us. You made it bigger. You involved him. You let it bleed into everything. Now it's out there. Deal with it. She didn't have a comeback. Just stood there, blinking fast, like maybe now it was finally sinking in. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The next day everything changed. I was pulling into the driveway after work when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, I got a text. This is Melissa. I told him to leave. Thank you for the truth. I'm sorry you had to go through this. I just stared at the screen. Then another message came through. He's staying at his brother's. Said it was just a mistake. He cried. I didn't. That hit me hard for some reason. Like I was watching her go through the exact same storm I'd been in for weeks, only she'd already decided to climb out of it. I typed back, you didn't deserve that. None of you did. She didn't reply after that. When I walked into the house, the first thing I noticed was that it was dead quiet. My son's door was closed. My wife was in the living room, sitting on the floor like she'd collapsed there. No TV. No phone in her hand. Just her knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. Are you okay? I asked. No emotion in my voice. She looked up at me. Her eyes were bloodshot, makeup streaked down her face, but her mouth was twisted into this bitter little smile. As she kicked him out, as she said, "Good Melissa." She called him at work and told him not to come home. I didn't respond. I wasn't about to offer sympathy. Then she hit me with it. He told her I was the one who came onto him. I blinked. A what? Yeah, as she said, laughing in this hollow way. Told her I was unhappy in my marriage, that I needed someone to talk to. That he tried to pull away. I stood there for a second, letting that settle. She was finally seeing who this guy really was, the man she chose over her husband and her kid. And now, when the cards were down, he threw her under the bus without hesitation. She kept laughing, this ugly, broken kind of laugh. Then she looked up at me again. Guy ruined my life for him. And he's not even defending me. I said, yeah. That's what you gave up our family for. That shut her up. Then she said something I didn't expect. I think I need help. I haven't been, right? I haven't been okay for a while. I didn't say anything. Because deep down, I didn't know if I cared anymore. It felt like everything was crumbling around her, and she finally looked up, but by then, I'd already walked away. That night, she slept in the spare room. I stayed with my son, just watching a movie with him in silence. He didn't say anything about her. Didn't ask questions. He just leaned into me a little, like he finally knew who was still solid in his life. I didn't have to say a word. He knew I was staying. That I had his back. But Michelle? She was on her own now. And Aaron? He wasn't getting off that easy either. I gave it a few days. Not because I cooled off, trust me, I was boiling. But I wanted them both to sit in the silence. I wanted them to wonder. What does he know? What's he gonna do next? I wanted them rattled. Then I sent the email. Subject line. For HR, inappropriate conduct and conflict of interest between employees. Attached. The call logs. Screenshots of messages between Michelle and Aaron. An audio clip, just long enough to prove it wasn't innocent. A timeline written like a report. Dates, context, company events she lied to attend. I didn't send it to one person. I sent it to her boss, his boss, and the HR director of the entire company. I kept it clean. No ranting. No name-calling. Just facts. I didn't care if it ruined their jobs, honestly, I hoped it did. They weren't just cheating behind spouses' backs. They were doing it on the clock, using company time and company resources. Let them explain that. Michelle found out 2 days later. She came storming into the house after work, red-faced, shaking, absolutely livid. What the hell did you do? She barked, tossing her purse on the ground. I looked up from my seat and said, told the truth. Something you've been allergic to lately. They called me into a meeting, she snapped. So humiliating. They're doing a full review. They suspended Aaron. I smiled. Couldn't help it. Good. She stepped closer. You just blew up everything. My career. My reputation. You don't get to play victim anymore, Jake. That one hit me sideways. Victim? Really? You cheated. Lied. Gaslit me for months. I was supposed to just sit here and take it while you played wife at home and girlfriend at work? She opened her mouth like she had a comeback, then shut it. Because there wasn't one. Actions have consequences, I said. Maybe you should have thought about that before you threw away your family for a guy who didn't even have your back when it mattered. She didn't respond. She just walked to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of wine, and went to the spare room, her room now, slamming the door behind her. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because I was over it. But because, finally, she was getting hit with the same weight she dropped on everyone else. I thought the worst had passed. Then came the night my son dropped his own truth. We were sitting in the living room, just the two of us. I was flipping through channels, half watching, half thinking about everything, the HR report, her breakdown, Aaron's suspension. It had been quiet for a while. Too quiet. Then my son just said it. I don't want to live here if she stays. He didn't even look at me when he said it. Just kept staring straight at the screen. I muted the TV. What do you mean? I can't pretend nothing happened, he said. She lied to you. She lied to me. She's still lying to herself. Every time I see her, I get angry. I don't trust her. I don't even like being in the same room. It hit me like a gut punch. I knew he was hurting, but I didn't know it was that deep. You're not the one who broke this family, he said, finally looking at me. She is. And I don't want to be around her. And I saw it, this kid, barely 16, having to grow up fast. Forced to face the ugly side of people. He didn't deserve that. I nodded. You don't have to, son. I got you. I meant it. So I started making moves. Called my sister, talked to a buddy of mine who had a rental place nearby. Started looking into lawyers. I wasn't about to keep sleeping under the same roof as someone who set fire to our lives and then acted like I was the problem. That weekend, Michelle must have felt it slipping away, all of it. The control, the family, the last bit of normal she thought she had. Because she made her final move. She sat me down at the kitchen table, shaking, eyes puffy like she hadn't slept in days. I made a mistake, she said, her voice cracking. Guy lost control. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to hurt him. I stared at her. Said nothing. I'll quit, she said. I'll block him. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything. Just please don't leave. Don't take him from me. I looked her dead in the eye. You already did that yourself? She broke. Full on sobbing. Collapsed into her hands like she expected me to hold her. To comfort her. Like I hadn't been the one sleeping in a cold bed every night while she whispered to another man. And the truth is, part of me wanted to reach across the table. Part of me wanted to believe her, to fix it, to make things okay for our son. But it was too far gone. Way too far. You can only patch up something so many times before it just can't hold anymore. That final week felt like living in a house full of echoes. Michelle barely left her room. No more arguments. No more blame games. Just silence. Like she knew it was over, but still kept hoping maybe I'd change my mind. I didn't. I called a lawyer. Told him everything. Not just the cheating, but the impact on our kid, the mental toll, the instability. He laid it out clean. Said we had a solid case if I wanted primary custody. Said judges don't look kindly on emotional manipulation, especially when a child's involved. I didn't waste time. I moved into a 2-bedroom rental 3 blocks from my buddy's place. Brought my son with me. He didn't even ask questions, just started packing the moment I told him we were leaving. That night, as we loaded the last box into the car, Michelle came out onto the porch. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there in her robe, arms crossed, like she was freezing but didn't want to show it. Then, finally. Is this really how it ends? I turned and looked at her, really looked. She didn't look like the woman I married anymore. She looked like someone I used to know. A stranger wearing my wife's face. This ended the day you picked him over us, I said. This? This is just me walking away from the mess you made. Her mouth trembled, but she didn't reply. Didn't run over. Didn't beg. Maybe she knew begging wouldn't work anymore. I nodded once. Got in the car. My son buckled up beside me without a word. As we pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was still standing there. Same spot. Arms wrapped around herself like she was holding on to the last piece of something already gone. It's been a few months now. My son's doing better. He talks more. Laughs more. He even started dating a girl from his chemistry class. Says he wants to be nothing like either of his parents when it comes to relationships. I told him that's okay, as long as he becomes someone he can respect. As for me, I'm learning how to breathe again. I still have bad days. Still have moments where I wonder how it all got so twisted. But I don't miss her. Not anymore. I miss the version of her I thought was real. The version she faked so well. But the real her? The one who lied, gaslit, threw our family under a bus for some cheap rush on a lunch break? She's not someone I'll ever mourn. And if you're reading this, if you're in that limbo, wondering whether to stay or fight or forgive, let me just say this. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Then save yourself before they burn you down with them.
Goodbye.